Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I drop my kid off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a cloudy, misty, mid-November day here in suburban Chicago, and I'm pleased to be talking to you once again. I hope this recording finds you happy and safe and well, and that you're excited to be joining me on my walk today. So I had Toggle Gaming last night where I got to play a number of lovely games. I got to try out Expand City, which I'm sure I'll talk about next time I do a Shooting from the Hip episode. And then I played a bunch of old favorites. I played Century, I played Quest for El Dorado, and Innovation. Good time was had across the board. Playing Innovation got me thinking about something, though, and I thought I would talk about it a little bit today. I guess I wanted to start with the TV show Sports Night. So Sports Night is one of my favorite TV shows. It was written by Aaron Sorkin, the guy who wrote The West Wing and that movie about Facebook, The Social Network. And he's a very good scriptwriter, and he tends to write really sharp comedy and when he wants to. And Sports Night was the epitome of that. It's a 23-minute regular sitcom style show with tight scripting, really funny interactions between the characters, really well-developed characters, fast setups, really a very smart show that I avoided watching for a really long time because it was called Sports Night. And I would argue the reason the show did not pick up the commentary or the critical audience that it needed to stay on the air was because it was called Sports Night. Now, this is not to say, not anything against people who like watching sports. That's fine. But the show is called Sports Night. And so I suspect that when some people, anyway, when they tuned in, were hoping for a show that was really about sports. Sports Night is about sports in roughly the same way that Brooklyn Nine-Nine is about the police, which is to say it's the setting, but not really the concern of the show. The Brooklyn Nine-Nine could just as easily be about many other workplaces and still function pretty much the way that it does. It just happens to be about a police station. Sports Night was about people putting on a show like ESPN SportsCenter. But it was a smartly written, tight comedy. And while there's certainly a strong overlap at some points between people who like to watch sports and people who want to watch cerebral comedy, I would argue that when they're in the mood for one, they're usually not in the mood for the other. And so thus, the people who felt like watching a Sports Night type show didn't get what they wanted when they tuned in Sports Night. Similarly, I think there's a fairly large group of people who would really enjoy Sports Night, except they're never going to tune in because it's about sports, or it seems to be about sports. So, I have since then called that the Sports Night problem, which is when a text misleads you so dramatically by its outer appearance that it's unlikely you're going to be able to appreciate its inner appearance, its content. This isn't entirely different from don't judge a book by its cover, but I would argue generally that's a warning against being lured in by flashy things. And I'm not talking about that here, right? That's the warning that there are some things that are bad or not worth pursuing, but they're given a good cover or fancy marketing, and then people end up pursuing them because they look cool. Sure, that happens, but that's not what I'm trying to get at here. So what I'm trying to get at here is the idea that mismatched expectations can shape, sometimes significantly badly, the experience that people have with the game. I will say it goes the other way too. If you've ever watched a movie that you heard was really bad, and then you thought, that's not so bad, or I kind of like that. Maybe part of the reason you give it enough room to find its own footing is that you were told it was really bad, so you went in expecting very little. Whereas if you go in expecting the best thing ever, and it isn't quite the best thing ever, then that's kind of disappointing. So those those are some thoughts just kind of leading us into this conversation. So the anecdote that started this was we were getting ready to play Innovation, and 3 of the 4 of us had played before, and 1 person was new to the game. So as we were introducing or teaching it, I wasn't the teacher, someone else was, but I kind of helped a little because I can't resist. I didn't interrupt or anything, but just where it was useful, I added a comment here or there. But the main thing I added, I would say my main contribution was to say, Innovation is a game where you try to get a good combo and then run it as quick as you can before someone else kicks you in the face. Because honestly, that's my experience with the game. It's the game of ridiculous combos, and frankly, a pretty mean game at that. And when you get a combo running, you either win the game or someone else stops you first. It's a mix of those things to try to finish. So I said that in part to set up the other people who were playing so that the new guy didn't expect that this was going to be a gentle game. But it did get me thinking about, because he sat down to play with us, he didn't really get lured in by the box or whatever. But it got me thinking about what are some games that are asking the question, what are some games that need that kind of preparation? And what are some games that have a mismatch in their presentation? So I'll start with the mismatch, and I didn't get a chance to write out a list, so I'm working off the top of my head. I would love to hear over in Board Game Geek Guild 3269, what are some of your ideas about which aspects of this observation work for you, fit for your idea? So what are some games you think have this misleading aspect? That's what I'm particularly interested in. We can talk about the other thing as well, and I'll ask another question at the end. But so, the misleading aspect. Generally, I would say, what I'm wondering about is games where the art design, thematic setup, box cover, setting, and so on provide a misleading picture of what the game is going to be. Now that could provide a misleading picture in terms of how the game looks or in terms of how it plays. So I'll start with a game that I've played, which I got cheap because I think of this mismatch. That is Hyperborea. If you look at the cover of Hyperborea, it looks like a D&D style adventure. You've got a bunch of fantasy characters wielding exciting weapons, shooting magic out of their fingers, if I recall, generally looking pretty adventure-y and awesome. Then you read about the game, and it's about these fantasy civilizations that are trying to re-explore this lost territory. Ooh, cool. And then you play it, and it's a game where you put cubes in a bag, and you draw those cubes out, and those let you take various kinds of actions on the board that involve moving a couple pawns around, admittedly pawns that are sort of cool fantasy sculpts, but then playing more cubes and flipping more cards, which the game itself is pretty interesting that way. But the gameplay is very Euro and frankly not adventurous at all. It's only adventurous in the most light way. And so then the theme just completely vanishes. And I suspect that that's one of the reasons. I suspect there's a mismatch there. There are people who would really like this gameplay if it has a slightly different theme. And people who love that theme, but then when they go to play it, they're like, what is this game? This isn't anything I want to play. So that's one example of the kind of mismatch, again, where I would say thematic mismatch. Another kind that I think occurs often is artistic style mismatch. And I would point to 2, although one of them I'm entirely interpreting here, and I would suspect maybe it hasn't happened. But the first one I would suggest is Carl Chudik's Motainai. Motainai is a beautiful game. It's got this gorgeous sort of watercolor abstract art of these Buddhist objects made by these Buddhist monks, and so there's lots of cool images on the cards. But the game itself is super heavy, super tight, very, very thinky and fast. So where looking at the game, the art in the game might make you think it's a Tokaido, it's really a Carl Chudik multi-use card game, which is a very particular niche of the hobby that seems to be something only he and a couple other people do. But I would suggest that probably hasn't been too big a problem for that game, because Motainai is only going to be sold in high-end game stores probably, and I don't think I think with a title like Motainai, no one's going to pick it up unless they know what it is. But it would be possible if you were setting it up for someone to see the art and go, ooh, what is that? I'd like to try that. And then not really be ready for the kind of game it is. On the other hand, I would say one that has seen a bit more of this kind of flack would be Root. Now, Root, from the art style, Kyle Farron, I believe is the artist's name, has a very light, cartoony art style. It's like forest animals going to war. But the box does not indicate that they're going to war. It looks very cutesy, and I've read a number of people complaining about how when they played it with people, the people were unprepared for the level of viciousness at the heart of the game, as though they didn't know that nature is bloody in tooth and claw. I would say Root is another example of a game where the art style mismatches the gameplay. The third one I would say is another personal experience. And this is one, I think it's a problem faced by all really abstract game designers. And how do you make a theme worthwhile in an abstract game? And this is Sentient. Sentient is a game from the person who did World's Fair, Alex Kevern, J. Alex Kevern. And it has a delicious puzzly element to it. However, the theme is like you're programming AI robots and blah, blah, blah. And the cover looks like something out of a science fiction magazine. And it just sounds great. And then you open it up and it is a purely abstract game with no theme at all. The game would not suffer at all if you took off the bare trappings of theme and just had them be colors and numbers on the cards and dice. I got lured in by the flashy cover there. I like the game. It's really good. But it is not at all about AI robots. So that's where games have failed to manage expectations, are a couple examples I can think of. I would love to hear from you over in Board Game Geek Guild 3269 of other games you think where this happens, where the game appears to be a different game than it actually is when you go to play it. The other thing I want to talk about here in my last couple of minutes is the idea of setting up your players for expectations. Now, I generally do this if the game is likely to be more aggressive. The more aggressive the game is, the more I work to make sure people know how aggressive the game is. So if I'm going to play Nexus Ops with somebody, I'll steal the phrase I heard first on the Dice Tower, but I've heard a number of other people use, which is knife fight in a phone booth. Or innovation, like I said. Make a combo fast and use it before someone kicks you in the face. Or Nanty-narking, like I said, is a game all about keeping the other players from winning until you can win. So these are games where it's expected or necessary that the players will actively engage with one another and mess with one another. And I feel like having to prompt people that that's what the gameplay is like is really important, because I want everybody to know going in, especially if you're a hobby gamer and you're used to playing Euros where maybe the aggression's a little more gentle. It can be rough to show up in a game and realize that's how the game works. The other games that are about interpersonal communication, it's even more important then. City of Horror, for instance, is a game about manipulating people and making deals, but maybe backstabbing them when the time comes. And you literally are killing each other's characters on the regular. So that's a few examples of games where I feel like I really need to set people up. The other genre I would say is games that are super heavy. You know, Cerebria, Anachrony, Through the Ages, Altiplano. The Altiplano is not really that heavy, but there's a lot going on. I make sure to give people plenty of notice before we play that we're going to be playing this game that is pretty heavy, and looking for them to be able and ready to engage with that. So that's the idea of the getting people ready from the teaching perspective. Again, hop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know what games I missed. What games do you go out of your way to prepare people to play from a theme or a perspective? Well, that's about it for me. I hope that you enjoyed your walk. I enjoyed talking to you, and I look forward to next time we walk together. Until then, thanks for listening. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.